And welcome everyone to Trekyards Mission Briefing, your weekly Wednesday dose of Star Trek discussion, review, theorization. We take a ship from the Star Trek canon, side canon, ship, game canon, book canon. We take a look at it, we analyse, we theorise, and we ask you guys what you think about the design, if you know any background information, or if you designed it even, we've had that before, and then just talk to us, tell us for a full episode down the line. But, what are we doing today, Stuart?
Today we're looking at a very sneaky ship, and from a sneaky race.
Yes.
We're looking at an Enterprise era warbird from the Romulans. So the Romulan warbird from the Enterprise era. Yeah. Anyway, I got a lot to say about this ship, so...
Well, hey, Stuart, that would be my first question. I mean, as we sometimes ask, what the first time seeing this ship, and what was your impression of this classic design?
First time seeing this ship, I was like, that's very cool.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Enterprise screwed up again.
Oh,
no. Because as we know, one of the reasons I didn't like Enterprise initially was it kind of messed with the established canon, even with the history of the Romulan War and the way the ships were supposed to look.
And obviously it's worth saying that's book canon. That's not TV canon. That's the other works that were established in the gaps.
Book or game, yeah, absolutely. So to see this thing decloak, it's like, wow, that looks super advanced. That looks like a TNG version of the Romulan warbird that we saw in Balance of Terror. It's TNG colors. It's way more advanced than the ones in TOS.
Clothes.
Exactly, and a good cloak, which, the first one was like one of the experimental cloaks apparently in TOS. So what's going on? I don't know. It's a nice looking ship, don't get me wrong. Okay. I love the design, but wrong time, guys. Wrong era. I'm sorry.
Is that sort of black and white for you then, is it? It's a great design, but wrong era.
Yep. Pretty much. Of course, because it is canon, I do have to fold it into my own headcanon somehow, and there's different ways to retcon it and explain it. So,
yeah. Which I'm sure we'll have a little discussion about. Yeah, I obviously watched Minefield live when it came out, and I didn't think they're Romulans at the start because a minefield of mines that cloaked is not a Romulan strategy at the time. Cool though, and then the ship decloaks, so I'm like, oh, that's cool. I mean, the TOS one is very, 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 very simple. There really isn't anything to it beyond the patterning on the bottom. It's uber simple. In my mind, the way I've always thought about it is it's a prototype ship, both for the cloak and also for the gun. It's not necessarily got warp. It was dropped off a bigger ship. It was built for one purpose. Didn't reflect the rest of the fleet aesthetic, which is why it's so radically different to the TNG ships. And this ship, obviously now the canonical fit. So seeing this ship, I was like, well, it's a great design. It has that obvious Romulan aesthetic, both in the colour, in the shape. Obviously the Enterprise things that are given the blue glow or the nacelle glow, obviously established in TNG, but then obviously NX-01 has it, so I mean that makes sense for that. And obviously later CG you can enhance things in terms of look. I mean, it's got plating. It's certainly, again, TOS is more advanced because it's simpler, it's got sleeker line. This has lots of plating, which you could argue is less advanced. Those arguments don't work as well with this ship, I don't think, just because it does work so well as a later ship. You'd probably smooth out the shapes a little bit if it was a later ship after TNG, just a bit, and maybe make it a bit more pointy or give it more of a beak, whatever. But design, I think, is a wonderful design, and one thing we're going to talk about in this episode is the scale, because in the episode you never get a sense of it with the Enterprise, the NX-01. It's always at a distance, and you get a sense of the window scale, but it's not the same thing. And obviously, worth saying, this is the 3D model used in Enterprise, obviously. I believe this one's made by Koji for Season 1. Beautiful model, very nicely done, and we've got some cool pictures today. So Stuart, the next picture is the aft view. What do you think of that?
Beautiful. I love it. I mean, this is a fantastic design.
It was designed by John Eves.
I was going to say that. It's designed by John Eves. He does some fantastic work, obviously. Yep. But again, like I said, growing up with Starfleet battles, I was used to the whole Romulan fleet aesthetic of Starfleet battles, where they all look TOS-ish. They do look like the prototype ship that you're talking about. I understand completely where you're coming from, that it was a one-off prototype ship, so it had a different look. Used very rudimentary parts and things just to get the main weapon that they were testing out there, the plasma torpedo device. But growing up with the Starfleet battles and the FASA looks, you're like, ugh, seriously, guys? But you didn't grow up with that stuff, so I love that we have different perspectives on this kind of thing. So
I grew up when the canon was always being invented. You grew up when there was no canon, so other people had to invent things, and then obviously that wasn't then continued. One thing that hits me about this design is look how small those impulse engines are at the back. I mean, they're mind-bogglingly small. Really. I mean, we filmed an episode that's hopefully coming out soon about the technology, and we said in the canon that they were less advanced at the time. But having such a small impulse engine, surely that implies reasonably advanced tech if it can still produce a good amount of thrust for the size.
Yeah, you'd think so. That's a very interesting point, actually. But then, how small are they? Like, how big is this ship? Yep. Do we actually know?
We do. Know. We'll get into it in a few. I'm not there yet.
Yeah, but I'm just saying. I mean, if you look at the ship and you don't know the scaling, I mean, you can kind of base it on the windows, obviously, but they are quite small, for an impulse engine.
And one thing I literally never noticed until this episode, and again, great thing is we can offer high def renders of these ships lit properly, out of the context of the show. Again, so proud to be able to do this for you guys. Obviously they've got the outer, a lot of green glow, more than I think there should be. I mean, that's a lot of green glow. There's also those 3 lines on the inner side of the engine, which I never noticed before.
Really?
I mean, if you look at the left engine, I mean, there's just that says like almost every bit of the surface has got a glowing green element. That's a.
I'm surprised you never noticed that before. I even noticed that before.
I've never just set to the ship before. And I don't think fan models tend to put that in because I don't know. We only had one fan model, so. But yeah, nice curves, great hull detail. Yeah.
Yeah. If you go to the next picture, we get another shot of those small impulse engines from underneath. And this underneath shot is very interesting. I love the texturing on it. I wouldn't have expected that, especially considering the TOS one. It just had that big bird and a flat surface, basically. But this I like. And I do like the fact that there's no bird per se, but there is that feathering pattern of the plating or the armor. So
I mean, that bird was always... war paint in space is somewhat redundant.
Yeah.
It's fine, but there's no real need for it. But having plate detail still presents that their need to have a bird, Well, I will say I think this view shows it off even better. If you look at the left-hand wing, it feels as if the wings are plug and play. The body is a separate entity, and that's why I like the fact it's deeper because it shows more functional space. It's not flat. This is the primary saucer pod. And the wings are obviously the functional zones. There is no living space. It's just attached, boom, but everything's integrated. One thing this ship I've said before, it's all about integration. Everything is in the hull. This, I think, if we go to the next picture, shows it again. Everything, just like TOS, is inside the hull. NX-01 has everything sticking out. The Klingon D5 is in Bird Pro. Everything is sticking out. This ship feels advanced. Everything is internal. That's my thought anyway.
Oh yeah, I totally see what you're coming from. Like the Klingon ships do look very. They have the rigging and the wiring to hold. It looks very much more primitive than this for sure. And again, those were designed by John Hughes as well. So I just think it speaks to the cultures because I've always thought the Romulans have been kind of sleek and devious culture and more advanced. I've always thought that. With the cloaking device and the plasma weaponry, like they're actually way more powerful. The Klingons are more just brute force, warlike warriors that get things done. So,
hey, but they have a bigger empire, so
it's true. That is true, actually.
Well, one thing again, I think the integratedness says about this is that just like TOS, as Gene said, and Matt Jeffries said, if you can't see visible weapons, you don't get a sense of what it's capable of. Yes, you've got those 2 forward gun ports, and we'll talk about those in a close-up later on, but if you look at this ship, all you see is the propulsion, some windows, which gives a sense of internal volume, 2 guns, and the engines. You don't, I feel like this has got a lot more underneath its, chassis that you just don't see. Fast warp, or good impulse, or maneuverability, or strong weapons, or shuttles. I mean, I feel like they also have jamming technology. I mean, if they have cloaks, they presumably have some sort of jamming to make their hull, unscannable properly. I love the idea of their ships of the era just being, you don't know what they're capable of.
Yeah, electronic countermeasures and things.
Yep. ECM and ECCM, from Starfleet.
Electronic countermeasures, yeah. It's from Starfleet Battles initially, and then Starfleet.
Put it up so high when I was playing the game. It's terrible.
You didn't always have to, though. See,
I know.
Strategy there.
It's useful.
But yeah, and again, like you said, with the guns on the front, what are those capable of? Are those plasma generating, like plasma torpedo launchers? The Klingons have visible guns hanging off their ships. Like, look at us, we're gonna kill you. These guys are much more like, we could be diplomatic if we want to be, because you don't know what we have here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next picture is I love this. One of Johnny's original sketches. I love the bird design on the bottom. I wish they would have gone with that. Other than that, it's pretty much almost exact.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful design. You can see exactly what he's going for. I do think, though, that the engines work better here by having less glows.
Yeah.
Although you can sort of extrapolate from that there are glowing blue or glowing elements on the backs of the nacelles, the ones I was surprised about. But I think having them a little bit less glowy works pretty well. But I mean, what a tricky concept, though, just like Tholians, how do you reinvent the same shape?
Yeah.
And I would not want that challenge, honestly. And I think it does a splendid job. And the eagle or the bird is just a beautiful, beautiful, much more aggressive, much more... Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not the hugest fan of the one from TOS just because of how basic it is. This one has so much character,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the whole making it look like the TOS one was basically a producer's idea, not necessarily designer aspect. Because when you're evolving ship designs, yeah, there should be some tie-overs, but it shouldn't be the exact same shape per se. Because we know, well... If you go to the Starfleet Museum website, there's the old Romulan ships were big and bulky, and I don't know, but I think for a visual tie-in for the audience that might not know much about Star Trek, design it to look like the first one is what they would say.
The Romulans, they haven't got that many designs. If you look at, you have one in TOS, which is a very specific ship. You look at TNG, they only really have the Deredex. DS9, they then get the little shuttle. In TNG they also had two little science ship and a scout, but same basic design, kit bashed around. In Nemesis they had Valdor. Very limited designs, but clearly what they're going for. To go back so far, if this had looked like anything else, it wouldn't have been recognisable. It would have been cool because then it would have been like a case of, well, this is a proto-Romulan ship. But for Star Trek fans, there is no connection because they couldn't. If they went to Deredex or they couldn't have gone that advanced. If they couldn't have gone TOS, there's nothing to go with in canon, unless it's something random. But then why bother? If you create and even creating a new sort of bird. I mean, the advantage of this sort of shape is it's actually quite bulky. It's a wonderful sleekness to it, but it's just a big sort of circly bit that comes in with two. If they did an actual bird motif with thin wings and thin, it would look too advanced. This obviously has a certain advancement to it, but. Yeah.
But like I said, though, like if you go to the Starfleet Museum website, there's they're kind of like a bulky cylinder, but they got like a wing strut shape down and then to the nacelles. It looks bird-like, but at the same time, it's a much more older, more bulky, less advanced version.
Yeah,
and I think there would be a visual tie-in.
I've seen some of the ships and they're god awful.
They are, but.
I don't think
so are the Daedalus class in comparison with the Constitution class. You wouldn't necessarily design a Daedalus to be the precursor to the Constitution class.
Well, it wasn't a precursor, but it was in the same fleet.
Exactly. Same thing here.
Yeah, but you can see all the pieces. I mean, to represent this, you still need the wings, the engines, the tail. Like you still, at least Daedalus, it's two nacelles, secondary hull, neck.
Well. I'm going to go ahead and disagree with you there because the Starfleet Museum ones I think look very bird-like and Romulan.
I think I've just got the issue that obviously I know that every ship bar one has a more pointy shape. TOS is the exception. So to go into those more circly things breaks, the feel of Romulan design. I mean, you look at Romulus, the actual city that existed both in TOS, Enterprise and Nemesis. Those shapes would be, they wouldn't design these big bulky cylinders. None of their architecture represents that at all.
Well, we do know that the older... Well, anyway, I'm getting into side canon and stuff here. I don't want to get too far off topic. But like I said, I grew up with the Starfleet Battles ships, and there's a variety of designs for the Romulans that, it doesn't have to be this ship per se.
I think it was a no-win scenario for John, but I think he made a beautiful design out of it, and once you accept this is their proto, because again, it is more bulk, it has more to it. Simplify it into TOS, it kind of works. And again, I maintain the TOS ship is not a ship of the fleet. I don't think ships of that era look anything like that. Specifically, they have more detail. They're bigger. They have more interesting shapes. That's not the ship they mean. Come on, the ship is so inadequate in terms of a warship. It's a single going out there shooting one thing. The cloak sort of works, sort of doesn't. I mean, it's not the ship you bring in.
Yeah, you obviously haven't played Starfleet Battles. Is all I'm saying. People out there know what I'm talking about. But we'll look at Starfleet Battleships at some other point. You'll see what I'm talking about.
But Stuart,
yes, dear.
This is not just it. John Eves designed this ship with the intention to have the bird. Now I know he sketched it in just because he thought obviously it'll have a bird. The original had a bird. So the next picture is the bird. Now I will just say I rendered this to look good. I didn't realize it was the exact same angle as John's angle. If you go back to John's one, then my one, it's literally the exact angle. I didn't realize I just rendered it to look good. So this is the bird.
Nice.
This is now what's interesting about this is that Rob Bonshun, we all know Rob, we all love Rob. He went ahead and said, you know what? I'm gonna make the bird. I'm gonna make Koji's model have what John intended to show John to prove it can be done. So
thank you, Rob. Yeah.
So he went ahead and did this, and because we have some of Rob's files, I wanted to include this and show their hard work, show what it would have looked like in 3D if it was in fact given that one bit of TOS extra. The real link to that aesthetic is the bird. And what do you think about it in 3D?
I love it, and I would have been a lot happier with the overall design had it had this, perhaps. More of a visual tie-in. I think it's great. I thank you, Rob, for doing that, because I think this is fantastic.
That is this week's Trekyards done and dusted. Next week, we've got another great part.
Yes, the continuation. Next week. Tune in.
So 7 days and just click on that link. So we'll see you then.
See you then, guys.